Hey, Black Mothers and others. Thank you for joining me for the Free Black Motherhood podcast. Free Black Motherhood is a social movement that wants to accompany Black mothers in their journey to owning their agency. We do this by offering educational spaces, tools, and most importantly, community. Here in the space of Free Black Motherhood, we have a vision for the world. That vision is that Black mothers have the resources and tools to remain present and grounded within ourselves despite the complexities of raising children in today's world. We also believe that we deserve the same freedom and healing that we want for our children. This space is ran by me, Meadows-Fernandez, a speaker, writer, facilitator, and community organizer, and of course, a mother of 2 kids. I can't wait to see the conversations and exchanges we'll have. Without further ado, let's get into it. Hi, Tisheila. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to finally be doing this.
Yay! Look, in more ways and more secret jokes than they know. But in more ways than they know. But to get us started, I want to kick you off with some introductory questions. I want to know if you can tell everybody who you are, what you do, and how you got started on this journey.
Yeah, my name is Tisheila Justice. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I'm licensed in New York, Tennessee, and Florida. I pretty much knew early on in life I wanted to be a therapist. I knew that that was something I wanted to be, except I thought I wanted to be a child therapist. And as I started my career, I was a psychology major, and then I switched to social work during a psychology class. And once I got my license, I worked with kids for a really long time. And then as my life started to shift, I started doing other types of jobs and roles. And I was a crisis mental health provider in a hospital, and I've done foster care and adoption. And then, that big shift in your life that happens as you get older and you have a child. I was already in private practice and kind of working at a group practice and seeing people and seeing that I resonate with certain populations, moms that have trauma, parents who have trauma, people who are trying to break generational curses, people who are cycle breakers, and people who come from dysfunctional families. I just noticed I looked forward to those sessions, and I made such a huge impact on those clients, and I loved it. And so when I had the opportunity to actually start my own private practice and pick my own population, I was like, I have to target these people, the people who their life is being shaped by the things that happen to them. And I no longer want their past to take ownership of their future. And if I can find a way to break the cycle and help them and figure out all those triggers that are causing harm to their life and help them come up with better coping strategies and not destroy their life and not self-sabotage, then that's what I want to spend my time doing. And so I opened my practice, and it slowly started to grow, and I started to get more and more clear as to who I was talking to and who I wanted to work with. And then that's how I got here.
I love that. I loved it for a number of reasons. And I don't know if we've talked about this before. I don't think we have. So my bachelor's is in psychology. And it's hilarious to me that you switched over from social work during a psychology class.
There was in the middle of the class.
Is it because the class had you this is ridiculous, I gotta go? Or was it a planned thing and the schedule? I gotta know that.
My psychology professor was married to a licensed clinical social worker that had his own practice, and she had him come into our class, and he was kind of sharing the ethics and values of social work and just the background of social work. And I was like, wait a second, because the whole time I kept thinking people aren't disordered. It seems like the system's disordered. It seems like they're responding to the system in a maladaptive way because the system is dysfunctional. And he kind of shared what they do, and I was like, wait a second, you can be a therapist and be and have this be the platform. And I do care a lot about social justice, and I do care a lot about just the things that aligned more and was more of the forefront of how social work functioned than psychology. And I literally switched after that day. And I was like very clear. I knew what I wanted to do. And my psychology professor was like, well, that was not what my intent was.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, uh-oh, he came in soliciting. But yes, one of the reasons so I love that extra context. It sticks out for me, and it impacts me for a number of reasons. One of which being, like I said, my bachelor's is in psychology, and I
Mhm.
started a master's in social work program immediately after undergrad. I ended up having to leave because, again, my husband's in the Air Force, and we had to move from
Mhm.
Texas to Wyoming. But the reason I was interested in that transition is exactly what you described. Not necessarily using that language of not believing people are disordered, even though it was on the same spectrum. And it was more so psychology was so concerned about the individual's inner world that it neglected to acknowledge all of the external factors, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I was really excited about the potential of social work. And when I left though and ended up getting a master's in something else later on, I was like, whew, but there's also a lot of work in social work. Like it's heavy on the work. The work is underlined, bolded, exclamation pointed.
And often free.
Yes, it definitely is. And I remember at the time, like I had, because one of my good friends, she continued on that social work path. And I remember she got her bachelor's in social work. She got an MSW, and now she's working on getting licensed to be able to
Mhm.
provide therapeutic care. And I just remember I'll like look at her and y'all, and I'll be like, "Oh, I wonder if I would have continued." And then I'll be like, "Ah, but I also want to do more of the thinking and theorizing and certain types of help, not necessarily be
Yeah.
tired every day." And like work in a community center. Of course, now I know there are a lot more possibilities than that,
Right.
but
Right. But you are still actually doing it, really.
that's true. That's true, but not the way I imagined.
Mm.
My dream, if I get there, is to go to school for community psychology. Because when I found community psychology, I felt like I felt that marriage between
Yeah. Yeah.
understanding the context of the individual, but also being like this external stuff has an impact, you know?
Yeah. And
So if you see me make it that way, you'll know I achieved my dreams. But enough about me. So, can you talk to me about some of the different ways that you help moms adapt to those external environments? What are the tools you use, the perspectives? Where do you
yeah.
follow modalities? Everything.
Oh, it's so funny because I just did a consultation right before this, and sometimes I try not to overwhelm people with like therapy speak and just techniques and all the things. Um,
Overwhelming.
but I do love, and I'm like, just so you know, I'm trained in X, Y, and Z, and I think because we need so much CEUs and like continuing education anyway, I feel like you just have the opportunity to learn so much. However, I recognize that I trained too much. Like, I think I renewed my license in January of 2026. I already have like 70% of my training done for the next 2 year cycle. And so I just like to learn. I like to learn a lot of different things. So I am currently a consultant in training for EMDR, and I'm going on to like I help train the trainings. And it's something I really became very passionate about. I actually think that because the EMDR training requires the clinician to experience EMDR, that I really can see what clients feel and what that's like and how it impacts me and just how powerful it is. So sometimes um, when people, what I have found as I'm working with new moms and just people that have trauma in general, but often new moms, having a child breaks open parts that they thought they healed already, and the reality is that all these negative things they believed about themselves is being reaffirmed. So if they thought they weren't good enough, if they thought they didn't matter, if they thought that they didn't feel safe or that they were in danger all the time, like that all of a sudden feels more present, even if they had all these strategies before that made that thought minimize. And when you have a new baby and you're home with a new baby, everything feels dangerous. Everything. All you're thinking about is how dangerous everything is. And you're so tired, but you want to be good enough because you want to break the cycle. You don't want to repeat what your parents did. You just have all this extra pressure that I don't know what to do, but I got to do it perfectly, whatever it is. And you just know when you're not doing it perfect. And so EMDR has been really a game changer for that, that especially people who have traumatic births um, or difficulty feeding in those early months. It shapes your motherhood literally the first like 2 weeks that you have the baby. If there's anything that goes wrong in that time frame, I notice that it could be 3 years later and moms will still be compensating from that one perceived failure. And so with the MDR, we can kind of target that perceived failure and make it feel less present. So you're no longer looking for evidence that it's true. And it kind of just gives you some relief. It gets some stress off your shoulders a little bit. And I feel like it's helped them maybe even understand the belief systems that they have that are disruptive, even if they weren't conscious about what those belief systems were. But I also have like some other strategies as well. Working with new moms means I'm really working with families. For a long time, I was like running birth trauma groups for moms and intensive postpartum groups for moms. And it just kept coming up that like my significant other wants to come or they need something like this. And this generation of fathers is the most active generation of fathers that has ever been. And I'm like, oh, we never considered having you in this space. I guess I should do something with you because you can't show up for your family and be the support person to this person that had a birth trauma if you're depressed or you're also traumatized or so society leaves you to just kind of function alone like oh you have your spouse like you guys are fine you'll figure it out but both people aren't doing well and so I that's how I kind of got into working with fathers too and working with them as a whole and working with couples. So I do offer like postpartum or infertility couples intensives. I do see couples here and there like on a regular basis, but for the most part, I do intensives and I use like emotional focused therapy for couples. I feel like that helps expose vulnerabilities and helps them see each other. They see each other's pain and they also see how to support each other. Um, I know that you mentioned you saw like my post recently about the iceberg of what's underneath a controlling mom. And I think when you don't see the anxiety, when you don't see the pain that's driving these actions, there's no compassion and there's no grace.
Hmm.
It's just, oh my gosh, like you're so controlling. You just want everything to be a certain way and it feels like a personal attack to whoever is supporting you. But when you see that it's something more, it's not a personal attack, it's that they're fighting a battle that you didn't see.
So, yes to that 1,000%. And I know I'm gonna see if there's a way to like insert a clip of the graphic. I don't know if I'm tech savvy enough for that, but I will add a link in addition to the link to your social and your page when I share this episode. And so, like, kind of backtracking a little bit
Mhm.
on that conversation around controlling moms and this idea of this iceberg of control. Um, Oh, I'm trying to decide where to even go because I'll just say them out loud and you can pick. So
Mhm.
on one hand, I want us to describe and paint that picture for folks that haven't seen it of that
Mhm.
social media post with that iceberg of control. So that's like one thing I want us to get into. The other thing I want to get into, and I'm not sure if we should do it first or we should do it second, is how the language of control is specifically weaponized against Black mothers.
Mm.
And those things kind of dance together, holding
Yeah.
hands. And I
Yeah.
don't know which way to go. So I'm gonna put the responsibility on you. Which one do you want to go to?
Okay, I feel like I can combine this a little bit
Okay.
because the perception of, for whatever reason, the world does not see Black pain,
Hmm.
especially for a woman. So it doesn't matter. And I hope this doesn't sound like a whole tangent, but an example that I can give when I used to work in the emergency room at a level 1 trauma center, my role in the emergency room was to be there in case of crisis or mental health crisis or assault or danger or whatever.
Hmm.
Anytime a black, an older Black woman came in and 50 or above, doesn't really matter. Especially the older they get, the more true this is. Even when they're in crisis, Visually, they appear to be strong and fine. They don't appear to be in pain, and they are perceived to be having a mental health issue before they are looked at as having a medical issue.
Mm.
So if they're having a heart attack, people are going to assume that it's an anxiety, like, oh, she must be anxious, or they're having trouble managing their emotions. It's not seen, and I don't know why it's invisible, but to the world it is invisible because Black women are infallible and we don't feel pain and nothing is wrong. And we, I think, sometimes have a hard time admitting that we have pain and acknowledging it or even knowing. So when you become a mom, you're doing something different. You're breaking the cycles. Your support system, maybe like other older females in your life, are more critical. They don't support what you're doing. They don't see that you're struggling. They're not going to see that. They just think you're being stubborn. They think that you are just being controlling. You just like telling people what to do. They think that you have all this cognitive awareness. They don't even understand that this is coming from an emotional pain point, that I am afraid for my child's life. I'm afraid that I'm messing this up. I'm afraid that I'm doing this wrong. So when I tell you to hold them like this or don't take my baby anywhere to do, that's me trying to ease that anxiety. I'm not even trying to control you. I'm not trying to push people away. I don't know what else to do with what's happening internally, and I feel like it's my responsibility to keep my kids safe.
Mm.
And I can't just assume that everyone is going to do what I have researched and looked at, and I know what's best, and I read all the things that the doctor said, and when the doctor gives me feedback, like, I don't want to mess up.
Hmm. So before we get into like you describing for me what that iceberg looked like, those external pieces as well as that like
Mhm,
lower interior level,
mhm,
I want to kind of reflect back and offer some things on what you just said that stuck out.
mhm,
So that piece of like us, I've never, I spent time, or you may or may not know actually, like for maybe like 8 or 9 years, I did Black health and wellness journalism. And so I have a good amount of experience, like looking into and being up to date on the studies around how we have interactions with the medical system. And like the two things that stick out for me, this shouldn't make me excited, but it does, is of course we know like the why of is racism and the dehumanization of Black folks, right?
yeah.
But even within that piece, this, I'm scooting back because I'm so excited, that piece that you talked about around how we, some people could use the term play a role. I don't feel comfortable with that. How we adapt, how we
Adapt.
apply and cast on that cloak of strength, is something really interesting that I'm reading a book by the Black feminist scholar Brittany C. Cooper, and it's about Black women like scholars around the time of Anna Julia Cooper, like that first wave that created Black, basically early Black intellectualism around like W.E. Du Bois, Booker T, all of them.
Yeah.
And so she introduces this concept that is really important to me, and I see it show up so much. It's called the culture of dissemblance. And so the culture of dissemblance is basically the language, and she wasn't the scholar that coined it. I can't remember that scholar's name. I'll put it in the show notes. Her last name might have been Higginbottom. Um, but it is basically that cloak that we as Black women had to put on to maintain a sense of distance and safety from our external world because it's never been safe for us.
Right.
And so, of course, that protective measure is what we need to survive because people don't give two hells or fuck about what's going on with us. And also, like what comes up or in that conversation, and also in this conversation with you and I, is the what happens when the coping mechanisms we needed to survive are slowly killing us.
Yes.
And then we're sitting here with this tension of things. And so it's a term that's on my mind often around just like Blackness generally, Black womanhood specifically, because that piece you talked about around us presenting, people assuming we're having mental health issues when we're dealing with like somatic issues,
Yeah.
and probably also the mental health overwhelm of dealing with them in the first place, because I know going to the doctor is real stressful for me,
Mm-hmm.
is like, I don't know if the providers understand that. I'm trying to figure out how I want to say this. We're having these conversations publicly, but I don't know how much
Yeah.
they stuck in. Um, there's a level of calm and there's a level of calm and ability to communicate that we have to hold in order to seem competent,
Yes. Yes.
and also that competence is weaponized against us as not actually being in a position of harm.
Mm-hmm.
If you
Yeah.
were hurting more, you'd be crying. If you were hurting more, you'd be yelling.
Yes.
You'd be writhing. You'd be doing all these things. And then when we do move and writhe and do all of these other kind of things, then we're seen as disruptive or as
Mm-hmm.
unstable or problematic.
Yeah.
And
Drug
so,
seeking.
like, yes, yes. Exactly. And so like that came to mind, and I just really wanted to plug what I'm learning about the culture of dissimilance because it's a nerd area for me. I love it. I'm gonna send you a
Yes.
screenshot in the book. And maybe even like
Please
if I
do.
could put a picture up. So like there was that part I wanted to acknowledge, how we had to adapt these things to survive, and also they can't, and I don't know, I'm sure someone has said what I'm about to say before. I just don't recall it being said this way, even though there's nothing new under the sun, is also, in addition to like just flat out racism of them not acknowledging our experiences, for them to acknowledge those experiences, they would have to acknowledge the fact, like you said, that not only do Black people hurt, but they are hurting us.
Yes.
And if we acknowledge that Black people have feelings, then we have to look at all of the things that have happened to us throughout history.
Right.
And
Right.
then you have to accept your role in someone else's pain and subjugation. And I think they end up on spirals of cognitive dissonance, and they
Right.
can't they can't put those things together, because if you're hurting, someone had to hurt you. So I just feel like that requires a level of self-awareness a lot of people don't have. And then the last thing I want to say before I stop talking and listen to you and what you're saying is that piece you spoke around, like the care that you provide, being in kind of like an intervention of holding on to trauma long term.
Yeah.
What I really love, and what sticks out to me about that, is I'm a firm believer that the way we start our motherhood journeys are the way we live them. And so many of us started it with trauma, like you said.
Started it with trauma. Survival
And
mode.
exactly, survival mode. Like some of us literally, you and I have shared
Mhm.
stories before, literally surviving,
Yeah.
trying to make it, trying to be alive. And with those things in mind, I just kind of find myself thinking about how we don't, that piece you said around us thinking we healed stuff, and like, again, I can't remember exactly the phrasing I'm looking for, but it's easy. I'm sure you've heard someone say, or maybe even said it yourself, like it's easy to feel healed in isolation,
Mm-hmm.
but like you find out what you really have going on when you're around people. And motherhood and mothering is the most intimate relationship you'll ever have.
Yes.
And I'm going to shut my mouth and let you respond and then tell us about the iceberg. But when I get started, it's hard to calm down.
But you just said everything so true that I feel like we adapt, and all of these skills that helped us be successful in other settings, like we learned how to be in a healthcare setting, or we learned how to be in a corporate setting, and we use these skills, and we, code switch, and we do these things to be successful. That doesn't work in motherhood at all. It doesn't work. And for whatever reason, whenever we weren't able to draw the line for ourselves, we do that for our kids, because I genuinely feel like people who maybe felt unprotected at times have no problem protecting their children. And then the line is, it's like, no, maybe I would shrink myself, or I would give up on this, or I would, you know, leave and try to find another provider. Not when it comes to my kid. You're going to figure out what's going on. You're going to figure out what's going on. And, when I talked about the older Black women that used to come to the emergency room, we would get the lab work back or the tests back afterwards. And these are like the most sick people. And we're like, you just have been walking around like this? When I actually when I went into labor with my twins, I walked in, I did not think I was in labor. So they didn't think I was in labor, but I was 8 centimeters dilated within like 10 minutes of arriving. I was giving birth. Like hadn't even made it to the room yet. And I'm like, why was I acting that way? But I told, as I reflect back, I'm like, I just don't think I have permission to act crazy in public. I don't think I have permission to be out of control in public, even in such a vulnerable situation where I need people. And that's a crazy thing to be thinking when you are in labor for the first time ever with twins and you didn't think you were gonna have kids right now. You thought that you had a few more weeks. Like, that's insane.
Girl, you're killing me. You are killing me because that phrasing you just used, having permission to lose control. And it's almost oxymoronic on the surface because a loss of control means you did not have control.
Hmm.
But we have to apply and hold on to this sense of control and
Hmm.
and these degrees even in the moment that we are facing things that we can't actually control.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
And
It
I think that's what the cape, the strength, the Black women trope comes from. And I even think that this aligns a little bit with my iceberg because I feel like with the iceberg, um, as we're talking about this experience that, like, for people who haven't seen it, on top of it, it says like the things that you would see, the things that you would notice with somebody who's being controlling. So they're being super protective, they maybe are snappy or irritable. You will see and notice that they're withdrawing, they're not spending as much time with other people, or they are rigid, they have a lot of rules that they're trying to stick to, they are easily distracted, easily overwhelmed, maybe. However, underneath that is like perfectionism, it's fear, it's um, attachment wounds, fatherhood wounds, lack of support, um, high achieving standards, not feeling like they have permission to not be in control. So even when they feel out of control, everything inside makes them feel like they need to regain it. And that's the only way they can be safe.
I just like I don't know if you saw me while you were talking doing this for everything. I wasn't doing spirit hands or dancing. I was saying it's everything. And again, speaking to that dehumanization piece is when we talk about what it means to be human, it's always around imperfection, you know? It's
Mm-hmm.
always around this
Mm-hmm.
possibility. And then when we talk about Black women and other minoritized groups, we're regularly telling people that there's an expectation to be superhuman to get you want to what is our favorite thing, working three times as hard to get half as far. This
Mm-hmm.
is where we work three times to get half as far when it comes to trying to present in the world in a way that's not gonna like disrupt these scales and this balance. And that piece you said around again what you see and what's under the iceberg, naming some of those specific qualities: fear, control, aggression, sadness, distance.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me think about like those initial scripts and expectations around motherhood, more specifically like it look, me at any time I'm gonna drop some nerd stuff in there. And so I might have mentioned on a different episode that like Adrienne Rich is the scholar that coined the language, the institution of motherhood, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so she tells us that the institution of motherhood, like all the other institutions that exist, was created to control. It was created to have direct expectation and control over women's bodies, and more specifically, It is to give women, and in this context, white is in parentheses, but we'll get into that in a minute. To give women control over the private sphere because men ruled the public sphere. We weren't working. We, again, Black women, enslaved lineage, different conversations. But I'm gonna oversimplify and pretend like equity and equality existed throughout American history, which would change the whole thing. But whatever. So so like she introduces us to this institution of motherhood where the role of the mother is to prepare and socialize the child for the status quo in the system that exists around you. And something I talk to people about at every opportunity, and I'm not going to get too far into this because it's a slight tangent, but everything I ever say or do is a tangent, so I don't even know why I say that. My life is a series of tangents organized in a person, I guess, kind of, sort of.
Same. Random facts and information that I know.
Correct, that nobody asked for, but if they didn't want random facts, they shouldn't have listened to the podcast. So that's what we're here for. But yes, and so of course, like, one thing that has to be called out explicitly is that expectation to and responsibility to organize a child in preparation of an oppressive system is a struggle for anybody, right? Even a white mother under that system. But as Black mothers and other non-white mothers, we find ourselves in that position where we had to decide, okay, if I raise my child in a parallel to the systems that exist, I'm preparing them for oppression. Like, I'm compliant in their dehumanization, and that feels fucked up, right?
Right.
But then on the other hand, if we raise them in resistance to that system, we're putting a target on their back.
Yeah. And a constant battle.
Correct. A constant battle. And so you find yourself like looking back and forth between two awful options, and you're expected to have this illusion of control. But there is none, you know?
There is none.
There's absolutely none. And so like, to take that institution, like, of course, then she discusses like the actual practice of mothering, which is less of that, here's what the world and the systems that be say around how we should mother, and instead gets into, this is the relationship we actually have to our children, right?
Yes.
And what I feel like your iceberg speaks to and illustrates very powerfully is what happens when the institutional expectations conflict with the everyday relationship, and we're stuck somewhere trying to navigate these differences, those conflicts. Like, look, we're the Titanic running up against the iceberg.
We are.
And we're trying not to sink.
And the people who care about us the most may not even see what's underneath.
Correct.
And all they see is our actions.
Correct.
And the things that they feel like we're doing to them, or that we're angry, because that's the irritability stands out the most.
Correct. It does.
And that doesn't get those needs met. There's all these needs underneath. We need somebody to come, and not just somebody, but we need to be able to recognize why we're doing what we're doing, how this is serving us, and realizing this is coming from a place of like, if I treat my anxiety, I won't have this rigidity. I won't have this irritability, because it's all about my anxiety or my sadness or the grief I feel for my birth or the experiences I had in my own childhood. And I'm being re-triggered by these experiences that I thought I dealt with, that I thought I was fine with, but they're coming up. And instead, people I have to justify my anger.
Yep. Have to justify your existence, your presence, your existence, your performance, have to justify everything. And like, one of the final things it makes me think of, before I like think about it in contrast to another post that you met and how, that you wrote, and how those two things relate, is it also makes me think about how we're in that, regardless of ethnicity, class, whatever, or inclusive of, maybe is a better way to say that, regardless of where we are, in addition to, mindful of all the different places we can exist on the spectrum of experiences, we also find ourselves in this place where that control piece is kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't. Because if, especially as Black mothers, if our children aren't like whip slick, there's an expectation and set of stigma and consequences around that.
Mm-hmm.
And also, as mothers, with this expectation of us to be the ones that control the household, many of us don't feel that we have any power, identity, or agency in any other part of the world.
Right.
And then the rest of us who do feel like we have that didn't ask to be responsible for all of it. I didn't ask for that shit. So
Right.
I like,
Right.
like the rest of us is like controlling. Take these kids, go make the schedules, go pack the lunches, go
Help
do the
me
things.
out.
Do the things. And so like with that in mind, I saw that you had another post that was doing excellent, having all kinds of engagement, a lovely reel that I got to watch that was talking about those differences between me families and we families. And I want
Yes.
to hear like what is the relationship? How does that connect to the
Mm-hmm.
iceberg? Where tell me all the things.
Yes. And I actually was just yapping and I didn't realize a lot of people would relate to it. But one thing that I feel like became very clear to me in my work, in my own journey as a mom, like trying to make sure that I'm, not that I'm breaking cycles and I'm doing things too. But I feel like there are a lot of kids and a lot of people who are raised to survive. And when you are raised to survive and you are praised for the ways you adapt to survive, you show up differently in relationships because I'm gonna always have my back. I'm gonna make decisions coming from this place. So those are really the places that I feel like I label them as me families. A lot of people thought that I meant like selfishness, and I didn't necessarily mean selfishness. It's all about self-preservation. It is about self-preservation. If you look at these families, like they are saying rely on yourself because somebody else might let you down. You might have learned that verbally, or you might have learned that through people's actions growing up. But either way, you adapt it to understand that what people say to you is not always what they do. And so when I'm looking at me families, they are ones that have a default parent. They don't necessarily rely on one another for each thing. Everybody has their own task or the things that they're supposed to be doing. You're responsible for this. And it's not an expectation that someone's going to come help me. And this is where we kind of reinforce a little bit of you don't have permission to break down because you got to take care of your stuff. If you do the dishes, you do the dishes. If you are, when we look at people who have very strict um, patterns and dynamics in their home, like I hear people say, well, my mom did everything. I don't know. If there's a piece of paper on the floor, who's picking it up? If the trash is overflowing, that shouldn't just be one person's job. Like everyone uses the trash. Like if you need, um, if one person was to go out of town, like is everyone going to fall apart because no one even knows what they do most of the time to take care of the family? That's not how this should work. And I know that I was raised in survival. And what I always find interesting is my husband was not. He was raised as a we family. And so when we first had our kids, before everything worked totally fine, like we didn't have a lot of shared responsibility. But becoming a mom, all of a sudden we have twins. We have a lot of shared responsibility. And I kept thinking I was going to do all the things I did before, like that it wasn't going to be any problem and this was my responsibility. And he would just be coming behind me, taking care of tasks that I thought were my task. And I was really resistant to those things because I thought that it wasn't going to be consistent, that I'm expecting you to no longer do this. I'm expecting you to let me down because that's what people do. And that's why I've always been hyper independent and taking care of my own stuff and doing these things because people let you down. And what I find that's different about his approach with family and his family's approach wasn't so much a codependency. And I think some people maybe misunderstand that it's all about attunement. It's all about connection. The connection is the most important part. So it's not about dividing tasks, whose task is what. It's about I should be connected to this person and I should be able to know the signs of when this person is not okay, even when they are not able to verbalize it, because we are connected. We have an awareness of each other. We talk about each other. Your well-being is important to me. And that is like what is the forefront of a we family. So sometimes in me families, because it's a survival, it may not be your well-being is the priority to me. It's your productivity is a priority to me. Your success is a priority to me. What you can do for me is a priority to me. And that's where I'm like trying to reshape it to where we show up for each other because we care about each other. That is what we are trying to do. And it is hard when some people are stuck in their survival and adaptive ways, so they don't fall apart. But your partner shouldn't have to fall apart before you feel like you shouldn't be the one getting up with the baby every night. You shouldn't be the only person taking them to dentist appointments. I should know who their pediatrician is. I should, because we are together. I don't want to wait until you can't before I contribute. And I know a lot of people that'll say, well, if they ask for help, then I'll help them. I don't know that as a family unit that you should only be coming when they ask for help, because I know when my kids are not acting like their normal selves. I know when they have like they seem sad or angry or whatever, and I'm going to explore that because I'm attuned to them. I'm aware of what's going on. Your well-being is important to me. Does that make sense?
It makes more than sense. I'm sitting here bobbing my head like one of those things they catch fish with. So there's that. And I'm really just absorbing and processing like what you said. Because again, the framing makes complete sense. It's clear. And also like the things that come up for me, you were saying with yours, using the example you used of unsure if your husband could maintain that regular support.
Mm-hmm.
I hear not only are some of us afraid that we can't count on the support, but I also wonder for those of us who are afraid of the consequences of help, that
Yes.
denigration, that punishment, that removal of something,
Mm-hmm. This will
the
come back and hurt me later.
mm-hmm, like, okay, well, you can help me, but what is it gonna cost me?
Mm-hmm.
And when I think about that, especially around childhood, you know exactly where I go: attachment issues.
Yep.
And I think about that, there's likely a very strong correlation between those of us who have disorganized and insecure attachments ending up both creating, participating in, and perpetuating, like
Yeah.
me versus we families. And the split, not to stereotype us, I'm throwing myself in here too, is it's given I have a disorganized parent or an avoidant parent, and I have an anxious or a disorganized parent, if not both. Like that's what I
Yeah.
hear. That lack of verbal acknowledgement of support, that lack of ability to communicate needs for fear it'll be withdrawn. I hear
Yeah.
all of that. And so with that link, again, we're not going to say causation is correlation, but we know they're related.
Mm-hmm.
With that link in mind, when we are people who have insecure attachments and we haven't like really settled into the idea that we're stable within ourselves, let alone that imagine someone can be there for us consistently
Mm-hmm.
and stably. What are have you decided or reflected on any things we can do to make even like small, like incremental shifts in that direction?
Yeah. So what I think are some of the things that I see is some people grew up to not be an inconvenience.
Hmm.
So the idea of even asking is a problem. And so when I know that I'm taking it back to the beginning, what I loved about EMDR and what I love about emotional focus therapy is that it gets to identifying, oh, you think you're too much, or you think that you're an inconvenience. And now that we have the language to understand what drives you not to reach out for help,
Hmm.
what drives you to not ask for it, we can be very clear on these things. We can actually confront this because we know that doing the opposite of this or getting the opposite of this will make that belief go away. And we can bring your partner into this. We can, and that's what I love about doing like the emotional focus intensive sessions, because I'm like, you don't need to see me every week for us to get to the core of this. We can get to the core of what's blocking you from connection. And the more you make the connection safe with one another, the more times that you are vulnerable, you are putting more, um, you're really building like this positive reinforcement for I can be vulnerable and it's safe. I can be vulnerable and it's safe. And you have to learn that a lot of times. Because if we go back, a lot of times it was reinforced to you that with certain people, you weren't. And distinguishing that, like, maybe the people you have in your life now don't deserve the consequences of what other people did to you in the past.
Mm.
And using that kind of evidence of what would support look like for you? What would, because one thing that I'm always say this, that I genuinely think people's adult love languages, especially when they're in motherhood and they're further along, it's just their unmet needs from childhood. So you love acts of service because no one ever did anything for you. You, you love these things because of that. And so helping them put these pieces together and say like, oh, this is how I've been creating a barrier to my own connection and support. And doing the same thing with the fathers. I do the same thing with the fathers of, um, what role do you have here? Because the role that you have here now is supporting your partner and making sure they're not overwhelmed. I genuinely feel like the non-birthing partner is the person that has the most control over if we are really a we or a me, because society gives them an out that they don't give moms.
I could see that. And I have a thought, but before I tell you the thought, I'm going to tell you this joke. It's not really a joke, it's more of a reference, but it's funny to me. I don't even remember where my husband got it from, but sometimes he'll say, great shop for mom and pops, but not dads. We don't care nothing about dads around here. And every time I laugh, it doesn't make, I butchered that joke and I'll ask him later what it is. But that joke comes to mind, we don't care anything about dads around here because, like, yes, the reason that came to mind is because I was going to say, I have a dad question. And also, I'm not going to go too deep because this is not a dad podcast. all the love, questions when they're relevant, but um but like something that I hear in what you said, in addition to them having that flexibility to decide how they want to establish family culture, consent
Mhm.
and comply within it or opt out or reshape it or do whatever. I agree with that 1,000% in many ways that I won't even get into right now. But I'm also curious, the different things that dads, especially Black dads, are navigating right now, because as you said, they are more involved than ever precedented,
Mhm.
and so, like, yes, there is a level of intention with the decisions you make, and also my heart does go out to what it is like for my husband and others that, like, you're the first person to be able to, like, really step up and be a good human in generations.
Right.
And, like, that's beautiful for your children, your son, your daughter, to see those things. But also, like, maybe they don't even understand the power they hold sometimes.
Right. I definitely kind of agree with that. And I even think, because one thing that I noticed is that even society kind of puts out that message. So I remember we were eating out, and I think our kids were maybe a month old or 2 months old or something, and we were out eating, and I was breastfeeding and everything. So like, I don't even understand this, but my husband was holding one of our twins because there's two of them, and
As
someone looked
twins
up and they're
do.
like, "Oh my gosh, I've been watching you, and you're such a good dad." And he didn't do anything but hold a baby. And I feel like in some ways that just highlights how little they expect a father to be involved. And without saying anything to me, it still kind of reinforces the message that you are still more responsible. This is not a miracle that you're breastfeeding two babies out here and you're taking care of them. It's a miracle that he's helping in any way, and you should be appreciative of that. And I think it's easy to not feel like you have the same level of responsibility. And thank goodness there's a generation of men that are actually like, no, like I want to be a present father. I don't know how to be. I don't have a, a blueprint for this. And I know that when I show up in spaces, people are like, why are you here? Like, where's the mom? When
That's
my,
true.
like, the pediatrician doesn't directly say, talk to dad, or they'll be like, so mom, how's the baby been eating? And I'm like, he knows, he can answer the question. And so that person has a lot of responsibility in intervening that. And that's how you prevent the default parent. That's how you're like, I can go to the pediatrician today. You don't have to take off work. Like, we both should be giving up our sick time to take care of our sick kids. It's not one or the other that is one person's more responsible. That I also have a role, and I'm not going to act like what I have to do outside of here is more important than what you have to do. And I think that when someone sees you, when they are recognizing we are equally creating the dynamics of this household, then they really kind of have to pull their weight on the front end. Like, that is where so much change has to happen, because what I see happening is that moms will try to, I'm gonna just let you support me, and then like the one time you let me down, the one time you do something wrong, the one time they're like, I got to take back over this because you don't know what you're doing and I can't risk it. And that's a survival instinct. That's a survival instinct. It's not even really personal towards the person. It's just, no, this is my responsibility. I got to take it over. And so that's where that controlling mom maybe comes out. But it's, they don't want all the responsibility. They don't want the pressure, and they don't want to be left alone doing it. It's just, they can't trust you in this moment. So it's really earning the trust too.
Uh, like you said, I think you said this earlier, that people miss that control is tied to perfectionism, which is tied to anxiety.
Yeah.
That is what's happening there. And I have so many background thoughts about that. But time is passing so much faster
I
than
know.
it was like serum, serum, serum. It's just everywhere. But speaking of anxiety and the different things that we carry and bring into our mothering experiences, or even parenting generally, one of the things that I told you I wanted to connect about was obsessive compulsive disorder.
Hmm.
And so I know that a lot of times we talk about postpartum depression, we talk
Yeah.
about postpartum anxiety. We don't talk as much about postpartum psychosis or
Hmm.
postpartum impacted obsessive compulsive disorder, or all of these
Yeah.
things. So I want to just have like a conversation around, like, one, how do those signs sometimes show up, not just in a very explicitly mothering context, but
Hmm.
also like in our more broad journeys, and what are things that we might have missed. And I know I should have probably started here somewhere, because I was like, hey, here's this really big meaty thing, 30 seconds, go. But like,
No problem.
if we have to have a part two, we got to have a part two. It is what it is.
I would love to, but I will definitely touch on it because I do think OCD is something that is not talked about enough, and just in general, these things aren't talked about. But one thing that I have OCD. I've had OCD my entire life. Um, but just like most kids, I want to say like 80% of the kids that experience OCD get their symptoms before the age of 12, but most of them don't get treatment. The average time frame it takes for somebody to get treatment is 10 to 17 years. And so much of that is people don't realize they have OCD. They are often really young and don't have the language, but also just maybe it's misinterpreted as a bad behavior or an anxiety, or they're being dramatic or whatever. And so when one of the things that I experienced when I was young, just one day, I decided, or my brain told me that if I ate food, I was going to choke and I was going to die. And I think I was 10 around this time. And my parents really took it as like I was being defiant, like not eating my food. And I don't know where your food rules were at your house, but the food rules at my house were like, if I give you the food, you eat this food. And so, instead of recognizing I'm coming from like an anxious place, because, icebergs and all, that I literally would take 5 to 6 hours to eat my dinner. And I'm not even exaggerating the time. I remember exactly, because I would chew a certain number of times to make sure that I did not die. Um, and I would get like timed, or I would get consequences because they didn't understand. And I just don't think a lot of parents understand that that is an intrusive thought that is not just anxiety, because I'm taking action following the anxiety. I have a compulsive, repetitive behavior that I am doing to ease the anxiety. And for lots of years, I had this struggle on and off. And I did a lot of things in my 20s. I figured out what it was. I did some treatment for it. The ERP, exposure response prevention, is a great therapy technique that helps people with OCD. And in postpartum, I don't know why I did not anticipate this. As a clinician myself, I find that OCD is so much more common for new moms than we admit. And I think a little bit of it is because mom anxiety is normalized. That we normalize, like, oh yeah, like you never held your baby and had like an intrusive thought that you dropped the baby and the baby got hurt, or you see these graphic things. So it's normalized. And because it's whenever you reassure someone's anxious thought that fuels OCD, that makes it grow, it makes it get bigger, it makes it get worse, and then it kind of spirals. And I did not even realize when it was happening until I started verbalizing some of the fears I had out loud. And I think initially my husband's like, well, that's not logical. Like that wouldn't happen. That's not a normal thought. And, his feedback, I'm like, it's not. Like, I feel like this is totally plausible. I feel like we have to do it this way. Every day I was like steaming their toys, and I would like boil water and clean all their toys every night. And he's like, this is not necessary. And to me, OCD really normalizes behavior that seems preventative and seems necessary for safety, and it's not. And so what I've noticed, even working with my clients, a lot of moms create their own self-imposed rules, which are really a result of their anxiety and OCD thoughts that I have to do it this way and they need to eat this exact amount and if they don't, then X, Y, and Z. And I know that doctors give recommendations, and I notice a lot of moms take those recommendations and they start having like OCD thoughts about it. Like I think this came from the WHO or something like that. And a lot of pediatricians are like, hey, just so you know, by this age, your child should try this many foods, or they should say this many words. And because this was said, it becomes a very rigid belief and something that's like, I actively have to think about this all the time. And if not, it's a red flag and it's really bad. And so these intrusive thoughts that are really damaging and harmful and fearful and scary don't turn off. And so I'm taking an action because I'm doing these word cards with my like 2-month-old. And I'm like trying these new foods, and I have like a diagram I created or Excel spreadsheet so that I can make sure they try these foods, and I write down how they feel afterwards. And it becomes this whole big thing that started from a positive place, but it's causing so much harm to the mom's well-being and the health of the child, and overall sometimes to the family. Like if you are consumed by this, you're not showing up for your partner, your friends, your family. You're too busy, you're consumed. And I think people always are like postpartum depression. Then there's like that's normal mom anxiety, but there's some really life altering things that can happen with like psychosis and OCD, and we don't talk about them, but they're very normal. And I know so many people who had OCD as a kid and it came back as a mom and they didn't even recognize the signs.
Yep. As I told you outside of this space, I have not been formally diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder, but I do struggle with obsessive thoughts, and I very clearly recognize a pattern of compulsions to respond to that. And so, like, the specific focuses kind of bounce around from time to time, because what I
Yep.
learned reading a book is a lot of times if you have one, you're at risk for a lot of the others, you know?
Yes.
And so like throughout life as a child, like I was really morally obsessed. Oh, am I
Mm,
doing the wrong thing? Am I headed to hell? Like all
yeah.
like religion was so stressful for me. It was ridiculous. Then like one of the I feel like we're definitely gonna have to have a second episode. All right. Like
We already know.
let whatever. Let's just yes. But like kind of speaking to those things showing up specifically in our parenting dynamics is because I experienced sexual abuse. I struggled, and this is a really unfun and uncomfortable, but I struggle with this
Yeah.
fear that I would ever do something to my children. And I have zero desire to do something
Right.
to my children, but people don't understand it's not about a desire to do
At
something.
all.
It
Yeah.
is about a set of obsessive thoughts of worst case scenario, often influenced by what happened to you in the past.
Hmm.
And I used to be so distressed putting on my children's diapers, giving them baths,
Yeah.
everything, because it's like I am in your private areas. No one should be in any, like, and
Yeah.
it was just so hard. And kind of like similar to your point, I mean, excuse me, directly related to your point, my thoughts aren't coming up because, and my armpits are sweaty because I'm like, oh, that was so awful. But also, it's true, and I'm sure someone else out there is going through that.
Yes,
It's
it's so common.
and like with that kind of stuff happening, you're so I feel like there's two possibilities. Like there are certain things, kind of like what you described, where it's like people love the idea of clean, so they kind of push it off and make you like quirky, and then they
Right.
put it under the category of control. And then there are other parts of it, like depending on what's going on, and then that comes more with the shame and the stigma.
Yep.
And I think about people, like thinking about someone who might have obsessive thoughts around like shaking or dropping or hurting their infant. You can't tell that to somebody
Nope.
because it's on a questionnaire and they're going to assume you have an intent.
Right.
And then when
Right.
we think about that intersection between criminal justice, racism, motherhood, all these other things, like I don't mean to sound crass when I say this at all. But each time I see a story of a mother who committed some kind of violent act, I'm just like, we didn't have to be here. This is everybody's fault because
Yeah.
you at some point created this environment where she felt like she was dying on the inside
Mm.
and she knew something was wrong, but she also had no safe place to express it because
Right.
it's like either you're a good mother and you're sane, whatever that
Hmm.
means,
Sane and
or you
quiet.
yes, and quiet, or you realize that you're not sane and you're afraid of your children being taken away. And
Yeah.
most of us, like between those options, you're going to be like, okay, well, I'll just suffer in silence.
Yeah.
And and just go on and just do whatever. And it's so interesting, and I've like been on different Reddit groups. That's one of my favorite places to be because it's one of the only unfiltered spaces to like interact with other people and read other people sharing experiences that I relate to with obsessive compulsive disorder. And like the trend that I've picked up on is like people who like struggle with like that moral OCD, like around religion, around like children,
Hmm.
like, or even other adults or whatever, like I do. We are some of the most intentional boundary respecting people you'll ever meet.
Yeah.
And so, like it's weaponized, like the surface narrative of someone who didn't think would be like, oh, that person is scary or a threat. But in reality, like I'm the person who stands 5 feet away from everybody's kids because I'm scared. you know? Like I'm the person who every time my children come home, I'm like, hey, let's talk about like the interaction that happened there. And we made sure that no one was in your close proximity. Like
Right.
again, at some point it can seem kind of like overkill. I'm not even gonna hold you. I'm sure it does. And also the like I don't control my brain.
Right. And OCD, and this is what I think people don't understand. It adapts to what
Mhm.
matters the most to you and it
Yep.
attacks that. So it is, I feel like its own little strategic being because I've had multiple types of OCD thoughts. And, in my mind, my children have died 1,000 times. And nobody wants to say that to somebody. It's not just shame, but real life consequences that
Yep.
could have that I would never hurt them. And I know that in my rational mind. But then my OCD makes me visualize it all the
Mhm.
time. It makes me think of I feel like as a millennial, it makes me think of like Final Destination, that movie, all the time.
That's one of my favorite movies, and it's so bad for me. But
It's
it's
so
like one of
bad
my
for us.
favorite series. It's like, yeah,
But
I could have
there's
wrote this.
just certain things. And if you see something happen in real life, or you see like this thing that can occur, and then God forbid something happened to you that you absolutely know the things that led up to it, it makes you believe you can prevent it. And
Yeah.
your mind is spending all this time to make your world more safe by thinking about how your world is so dangerous and how you need to be a better person and how you need to work on all these things. And it's just a very pervasive, sneaky mental health issue that I think people don't realize, and they don't always feel comfortable explaining to people that, like, oh yeah, I think about this all the time. This comes to my mind all the time. It's my worst fear.
Yeah. And you know, the first person that I found who had that in common, so I wasn't raised with my dad, and what I mean when I say that is like he would pick me up from school every once in a while or something like that, but I wasn't in like long-term meaningful interactions with him.
Mm-hmm.
And then we kind of started interacting more when I was around the 7th grade, and so of course there was an acclimation period, chaos, blah blah blah. But as I got older, I realized a lot of the stuff that I don't have language to describe to other people about myself came from him. And so, like, one day we were on the phone and I was like, yeah. And you know, sometimes how you'll just be walking around down the street and then you'll see a crack and then you'll imagine a nail and then you'll imagine the nail stabbing you in the foot and you rolling down a hill and falling in a hole and drowning to death. And he's like, yeah. And a shark will be waiting at the bottom. And
You're like, huh?
yes, again, that's a false reenactment, but like again, how the conversation went. And so it was so interesting because, like, when I was younger, I remember he used to give lectures. I remember one in particular. No, this one was to me. It was so ridiculous. Like, I was trying to go somewhere with some boy, and I think I had on a really short skirt or something. And then he was like, and you're gonna leave the house with that really short skirt, and then some guy is gonna be like, again, problematic content warning, but we're headed there. We know where it goes. And some guy is gonna say something inappropriate, and then it's gonna hurt you, and you're gonna be scared, and then you're gonna tell me and your brother, and then your brother's gonna go beat him up, and then because your brother beat him up, he's gonna spend the rest of his life in jail. And like that's how my
Whole
dad's
thing.
story. Yes, that's how my dad's stories used to go. And like back then, we would be like, "This is just a dad lecture. This is obsessive thoughts, man. This is a brain unchecked, out of control, rolling down a hill,
Out of control."
completely out of control." But because it was just dad stories, I did not yet understand that that was the exact same thing that was dysregulating me in every area of life. Starting out with like one specific thing and then watching like, again, kind of like, you know, a ball of yarn, except the reverse of a ball of yarn. Like how a ball of yarn gets smaller as it goes, starts
Yeah.
out with a string, and we're watching it play in reverse. And it's, again, I just wonder all the people, like, not only in these early stages of, like the earlier parts of motherhood, but in later motherhood as well, that we are just out here, you know? And
Yeah.
like you might have made it past the discomfort of the diapers and the baths and steaming the clothes and the bottles, you know, and thinking
Yeah.
we have to buy every consumerist wet dream to have everything for
Everything. Yeah.
everything. Because truth be told, a lot of these commercials, that's what they prey on. They prey on
You barely
our.
need any of that stuff.
We don't need any of it. You need a milk source. You don't really need a diaper. It's nice so you don't have shit on the floor. But like you can survive and you can take some old clothes if you have to. Like you really don't need that much for a child other than attention, which is your most expensive resource.
Right.
Like that's really attention and patience. I'll give you that too. But yeah, so like and I just think about all these people who move through their lives like not aware. And I even think about the me families versus the we families. Another one that I struggle with like really severely is ROCD, around relationships. And I can go from fine to, oh my God, I've been married for 12 years, but my husband never loved me, in 2 seconds. In 2 seconds. And don't let me be in my luteal phase. It's over. It's over. I think
Our mind can convince us of a lot of things easily.
It's over. And so again, I just wonder like how much time are we navigating through our lives, navigating this internal iceberg afraid to get support, afraid to go to the doctor, all of
Yeah.
these other things
Not
because
making time or having time to go get your own support or
yep,
to see a therapist or
yep,
to go get a spa day or to relax or be with your friends. You don't have time. You just have so much that you have to do.
all of those other things. And kind of one of the other things that comes up for me as I like start to come down the hill, being mindful of your time, is that I would like your acknowledgement and or validation on the accuracy of what I'm about to say, because I believe I read this, but I want you to affirm as a licensed mental health professional if it's accurate. I believe I heard someone say accurately, specifically around like our obsessive thoughts, that generally there's a traumatic triggering event that set things in place that kind of like started not, and it didn't necessarily have to be about that thing, but that showed us we had to preoccupy and kind of obsess.
Hmm.
At first, I want to know, have you found that to be like, what have you found that to be true? Is that something like your experience has validated?
So personally, as a clinician and everything, I do feel like there is a starter. There's something that started this. There's something that caused the anxiety. I do I believe that OCD comes from it's solving a problem. That part of you is solving a problem. So there is something that happened, and the response to that thing is OCD. So it meets a need, and we have to identify what the need is. We
I
have
love that
to,
framing.
what I have found, for some people they remember, some people they don't. But what I have found with people is that when they figure out how, once they do the exposure and they do the prevention of the response and they can learn that pattern, that specific OCD that they're working through can decrease, but it may pop up somewhere else.
Yeah.
And it might look different and it might be a different way. And so when I'm working with people who have OCD and I'm like, I'm seeing a pattern, like so much of yours is related to this. Let's maybe do some tackling or exploration of like what made you not feel safe, because you're saying you do this because it makes you feel safe. You're saying that if you don't do this behavior you feel unsafe. Like let's explore this feeling of unsafety. Where did that begin? Where did this belief that I have to um, be be a good person. I have to be a better person. I don't want to go to hell. I don't want to hurt people. I don't want to be these things. Okay, so let's start with what makes you think you're a bad person. Let's explore that.
Hmm.
And so, in the work that I have done, and even in my own personal life, there's something that the OCD is responding to.
Hmm. Hate it. Now I feel like I'm in therapy. Hate it. Hate it. Mm-mm.
I know. I know.
Being a human is hard.
It really is. And it's even harder when we pretend that each other are robots and everybody is fine and nobody has problems. And so you still have to go out and pretend to be fine, despite the fact that you, like, you know, couldn't even vacuum your house because you thought that the vacuum was going to blow up and you have no reason to believe that. But I'm going to go out and people are going to say, "How are you?" And I'm going to say, "I'm fine."
Yep. 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 And that rigidity piece you talked about earlier, when I tell you my black and white thinking is off the charts, and I'm like, in the like the worst part about it is you've seen, like, we've been connected online for a good amount of time. I have a great brain. I think
Mhm.
very dynamically. And also, it finds pit holes to trick me. So if it's tricking self aware as me, what is
Yes.
it doing to everybody else?
Yeah.
What is it doing to everybody else? And my heart just breaks for all the people that find themselves like stuck in cycles in relationships, in life, in
Yeah.
parenting, where their brains are telling them things that are harming them.
Yep. That's
So,
harming their life, harming the people they care about,
yep.
and don't
Forcing,
even know what to do about it.
oh, and now that has me wondering if anyone has ever done a study on like people, like not just like general motherhood and OCD, but more specifically obsession with perfect motherhood and finding yourselves
Mm.
in look, I see your face.
Hmm.
Research interest on deck. We need to know that
We're gonna
intersection.
look this up.
Yes, we need to know those intersections. How is it showing up? How many of these people we see out here influencing online with their perfect lives are actually performing obsessions and compulsions for the rest of us, offering rigid perspectives and driving us
Yes.
crazy?
Hey, you're just asking a question.
I'm just asking a question. I don't know, but I just feel like we should look for some smoke to see if there's some fire, but that's just me. That's just me. But I guess the last question I have for you right now, it's a two-parter. Actually, that I lied. It's a three-parter. The first is there anything else you would like, now I can't remember if it's two or three. Is there anything else you would like to say or talk about that you haven't got to say or talk about yet?
I feel like this was actually very efficient. The conversation flowed very well. I don't feel like I have anything particular except I actually am doing a couple of conferences, and some of the topics are what we talked about today. So, like me and we families, and also survival and our survival strategies, and how we can turn our trauma history into success stories. And that's coming up at the ACES conference
Okay.
in Texas, April 8th through 11th, I believe. So, Dallas, Texas, if you're interested.
Oh, that's where I'm from. And for those of y'all who don't know, ACEs is Adverse Childhood Experiences,
Hmm.
correct? Yep.
Yep.
So you said it's in Dallas in April?
Yes. So, just a month away.
Okay, just a month away. So send me any links that I need to get this. And then what date in April?
8th through the 11th.
8th through the 11th. This should be out by then. Yeah. And then we can also, like, when we share it online, have that clip there. So thank you for sharing that. And I know that's a lot of gonna be a lot of awesome information that folks can benefit from. I'm gonna have a link to your Instagram and website. Is there anywhere else or anything else you want folks to be looking out for you online, or when they should reach out to you?
Well, if you're looking for services, you can reach out at any time. I do consultations multiple times a week. I am available for speaking and all those kind of things. If people are interested in getting more, I did create a free workbook for becoming a we family, like trying to break down our strategies that keep us safe but keep us distant. And I really just honestly was like, other people are experiencing this, and I want them to have access to something that might at least get the ball rolling and starting that family with their partners. And so that is, I'm always on socials. You can always reach out. I try to be out there educating and sharing and being connected to other like-minded people, and so I am around.
Yay! I love it. And my last question for you is, what does free Black motherhood mean to you?
Mm. You know, I actually feel like I've thought about this. I feel like for me, I want to enjoy my kids' childhood, not just because I want them to remember that they had a great childhood. I want to remember having a great motherhood experience. I want to remember feeling connected and enjoying the things that they enjoy, not just being afraid of the future, and being
Mhm.
present and being able to like have really good connections and have a life with them. And I feel like that's how I kind of approach parenthood now. I just am like, my priority is to be a person that you actually have a relationship with, not to
Mhm.
tell you what to do. I'm not here just to tell you how to survive this life. I'm here to love you and care for you and do life with you.
Mm. Freedom and actually enjoying the experience.
Enjoying the experience. I'm providing nurture, protection, and wisdom, but not, I don't have to like drive home. I got to be tough on you because the world's going to be tough on you. That's just You don't need toughness at home. You need love. So the
Look, you
world's
know
kind
what
of
I
tough
hear?
enough.
I hear, look, that same, and I'm sure you have this experience also, that same brain that sends me negative thoughts real fast sends me cool thoughts real fast too. And I hear you saying a lot of us are going to be shifting from wardens to coaches.
Yes. Yes.
No more warden mamas because it's exhausting. I'm not trying to police you. No,
Exactly.
I just don't have time. But I thank you so, so much for chatting with me today. And I look forward to this being the first interaction of many. Thank
Mhm. Thank
you.
you. I appreciate it.